And this area in particular, I find just really kind of it's my favorite part of Europe. I love going to the big name spots, but this area just feels very European to me. And I realized through talking to friends and other travelers that it gets overlooked more than I realized. And I had to remember the first time I came to Europe, I had a vague plan to see things. And the one of the few that I said I don't need to ever see is Belgium. I thought there's nothing in Belgium, right? It's just kind of a stand-in for generic European country. And then I ended up living there because it's just such a great region. Especially, as Rainer just said, the second cities. I think a lot of people, when they think of this area, they think of Amsterdam, which is a great city. I love it. I chose not to live there, partially because it's a city of less than 1 million people that gets something like 22, 23 million people a year on a city with canals, bike lanes, maybe a car lane, and then a little pedestrian. So it's just hard to be there. And it's the point where your tourism is kind of to the point where it's kind of harming the places we go. So now is just a great time to spread it out, see some other areas, and whether that means within the famous countries and just different sites, or getting out into some other ones. So I wanted to just mention the Benelux. I chose this name because I've been here too long. Talking to Americans, I realized nobody has any idea what that is. So Benelux, it comes from the first letters of each of the relative countries. That's the tour we're going to do from Rotterdam, where I am now, down to Antwerp to Luxembourg. But the Benelux is that little chunk right there. If you know, down below us is France, just to the east is Germany, Denmark is that way, a couple hours, England right over there. I can see it from my house. It's sorry, Sarah Palin joke. I can't help myself. That little area right in there is just fantastic. And it somehow gets overlooked. It's 3 countries in one. So Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. And I just wanted to go through, try to real quick and say a little bit about each one. And then one added element about why they're particularly interesting and even important to visit right now. So I figured I'd start at the bottom, while I know I haven't talked too much. And because when we get to the Netherlands, I will try to rein myself in and not talk for, say 11 days, like the tour. But starting down with Luxembourg, it's a fascinating place. You might wonder, how can just a tiny little country like that even exist anymore? Was it just kind of forgotten? Luxembourg used to be a more important, larger country, and it's just been whittled away. But part of that history means it's the last grand duchy in the world. If you've been to Italy, the Medici and Tuscany and all that. That was kind of the first grand duchy. They made up a term for themselves. Luxembourg is the last one. It has grand dukes. It has like full-blown aristocracy that still live there. That is one of the defining features of it. It makes it a very interesting, just sort of example and little shift on the more common kind of parliamentary systems we're used to, and just seeing what they do and how they're related to everyone makes it very interesting. But the main thing about Luxembourg that has shaped it is it's right in between France and Germany. And I don't know if you know this, those two don't always get along, say in previous centuries. So for a long time, whether it was Holy Roman Empire, they hadn't chosen Germany yet. It was basically Germany against the French. And then when the Spanish get involved, mamma mia, it was a mess. So because of that history, and that controls the kind of the valleys and the rivers between the two, you had a little bit of war now and then. So you have, first food. I almost forgot food. When you're right between Germany and France, one of their things they love to say is they have the quality of the French cuisine with the portions of the Germans, which sounds like a recipe for a good meal to me. And it's true. They have very good food there. I had to not forget that. But the war. This is Luxembourg City. I've shown this before. It's usually my first one because it just shows that it's on this river valley, and the whole thing is basically a series of fortresses. They have castles up the wazoo. That's a whole different set of them because you had all sorts of things coming through. You got castles like that one. You got castles like that one. That one's got a really cool museum in it. You got castles like that one. You just have a lot of castles. But the thing about having all of that is through the modern age, even when you get to this, you don't need castles. You still are geopolitically important. That's when you end up with World War One starts when Germany the first border they crossed was into Luxembourg to take Luxembourg. That same path that they took across Luxembourg into Belgium to sweep around France, they did again in World War II with the Battle of the Bulge. They tried the same thing in both to finish World War II that they did to start World War One. That results in a lot of history in the area. There's different things to see. I'm trying to find the right tour for us and all of that to come see it. One of the just things that we as Americans, since we've heard so much about World War, particularly II, but it happened kind of far away. So going and seeing things and feeling connections with us and Europe and all that, they have one of those American cemeteries is in Luxembourg, and it's an interesting place to go to. That the monument at the very back there is by the grave of General Patton, George Patton. He survived the war, obviously, and he said after he died, he wanted his body taken back there to be with his fellows in Luxembourg. So it's a very interesting country. But now that's a lot of war. Like, why would you want to just go to war? Do they have anything else in particular for them? You may have heard of them as one of the main European cities for the EU. This is the criminal court is in Luxembourg. But beyond that, something else they're kind of known for, they're the richest country in the world by a long shot. And they have been for 10 years running. They took the lead, and just it says at the bottom there, hasn't ever looked back. They're quite rich. Now that's part of why most of us have never heard of them. I mean, I said when I was going to Europe, I was going to skip Belgium. I didn't even know about Luxembourg to skip it. But then I got there and saw this amazing place. We haven't heard of it because they don't need tourism. They don't need that help with their economy. They're doing just fine without us. But they have tons of stuff to see. And in terms of when you start seeing the crowds in every brasserie in Paris, you start thinking, is there a place I can go that doesn't have quite the lines? There is. Now, what do they get with that money? It's the only country in the world that has completely free public transit. All the trams, all the trains, everything's just free because they said people want to be able to get around. We have a beautiful city, and we don't really need everyone burning their cars and crowding the roads and everything. So they just made it all free. And that's handy when you're getting around Luxembourg. You don't have to hike up and down those slopes every time. And they also have amazing museums. I had to put this one in. I have probably more illuminating pictures, but this one just shows that Luxembourg sense. They have that's a caveman sitting in the couch when you come in, hanging out with his ostrich buddy. But sorry, I'm a little scattered here. That public transit gets you out of the countryside, and the Luxembourgian countryside is absolutely gorgeous. If those pictures of castles didn't sell you on it, hopefully some of these will, because it's just a beautiful place to be. Including this is one of the little towns right on the border there. We'll go there on the Christmas market tour, but you can go there with it from the Benelux one or anytime you're there, just moving around the country with free public transport. The people are very friendly. They speak Luxembourgish, which nobody else speaks except for people in Transylvania and Romania, happen to speak the same old German dialect. But because of that, they all speak Luxembourgish, French, German, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, Chinese. They speak everything. I talked to the guy in the hotel we used there. He said he moved there because back in London, his kids were only learning 5 languages, and that was not enough. So you can travel around Luxembourg, even in the countryside, and speak English, no problem. So Luxembourg, very overlooked, beautiful country right in that heart of Europe. Next one up, Belgium. I'll go a little quicker because we've heard of Belgium. You know Belgium. What do we know Belgium for? Chocolates. The Belgian chocolates are as good as you say, as they say. Belgian beer is phenomenal. When I lived in Belgium, I didn't really like beer, and all my beer drinking friends told me that I was a disgrace for not taking the most of it. But Belgian beer, you sit with, you have a relationship with, you sit with that glass. Maybe you speak with that glass. They have beer sommeliers, beer flights. It is not just a matter of, chugging a beer. You get to know it. They say you should have a relationship with your Belgian beer. The only problem is when it starts talking back to you and you get in a fight with it, maybe time to go home. Until that point, though, enjoy your Belgian beer. Belgian waffles. I can't look at that too much, or I'm just going to get too nostalgic and go get on a train right now. They are fantastic. The different types of them as we go around. We'll talk about it when we get there. You've seen the Grand Place in Brussels. They have beautiful architecture throughout the country. It's just a beautiful place. This is over there in Leuven. There's the kind of day trip we'll take from Antwerp. It's just a beautiful city, university city, of course, historically important, great cafes. When the sun comes out, it's fantastic. I admit, I kind of played hooky today. I spent all day out on a terrace today because the sun came out for the second time since like September. So the entire country goes and sits in those terraces and sips a beer and talks and gets along. You've seen by now probably on my presentations of this, the Antwerp train station. If that's your train station, then you clearly care about how things look in a sense of style and beauty. It's just a gorgeous country. They also have museums. They got a lot of great art. So you're just going to have to go to museums like this. Except, no, if you've noticed that some of those paintings, that is not in Belgium. That is not in the Benelux. That's in a certain southern neighbor where the museums look like that. The museums in Belgium have fantastic art and are more likely to look like that. It's just you and a phenomenal painting in a gorgeous museum. And there's a great cafe in the entryway where the prices are totally reasonable. The food's really good. And there may be a dude playing the piano. So you can enjoy the art, stand in front of it. And then I chucked this one in there too, because I just got a kick out of this. The painting on the wall there was made in 1868 to show the way that museum used to look. They did like a huge renovation of it. It's the Fine Art Museum in Antwerp. It is absolutely beautiful. When they put it, when it opened again, it's really playful. I think I showed in a previous presentation the moving features that are just in the room. But this I loved because they put the statue from the painting in front of the painting that has the statue. So it's just you get to stand there on that spot and look at the same thing that artist did in the 1800s. And particularly, that painting was made in 1886, which was the year that a young guy by the name of Vincent van Gogh went to that same museum and loved it and was so inspired, and it kind of opened his mind to some of what art could be. Between that and the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, he wrote all these letters about those two museums to his brother Theo. So you get to stand in the spot where not only the artist painted that sculpture, but where Van Gogh stood and appreciated that. It's just the sort of thing you get when you go through Belgium. Now, in addition to its more famous things, the chocolate, the beer, the waffles, Antwerp for its fashion, the diamonds, all that stuff. What else is particular about Belgium? Because I wanted people to see the Benelux is one big entity, but they all have their own personality. Luxembourg is very aristocratic. It feels like a kind of an aristocratic city with its big estates. Belgium's one of their main things is their political layering. Belgium was kind of created to be a buffer zone after the Napoleonic Wars. And the bottom half speaks French, the top half speaks Flemish, basically Dutch, and then the little blue one is Brussels. So you get three distinct things. In Brussels, they speak mostly French, also Flemish, Arabic, Turkish, Moroccan, English, every language under the sun. And then this is actually oversimplified because there's also a piece in the kind of southeast that speaks German, because after one of the wars, they said, you can have some Germany. The result of that, it's not just confusing for them, and it changes how they see themselves. I've never seen a country less kind of patriotic than Belgium. They do not praise themselves all that much. They have definitely a sort of cautious cynicism. But an effect of that much political layering, they have learned is they're very quiet spoken. The Belgians don't really speak up too much about their opinions about things other than football, beer, and French fries and chocolate. But they have them. They just have learned to kind of keep it on the down low in order to keep things getting along. So I added this just because I took this when I walked through Antwerp last time. And it just seemed like the kind of a token of Belgium, because you have this beautiful, friendly, curious sort of Belgian personality, and it's just kind of inside. But once you get that door open, you can get in there and you can talk to them. So the Belgians, I lived there for years. I never met a Belgian I didn't like, but unless you push, you don't really get to know them. So they're very kind of easygoing but cautious. But if you show up with curiosity, with a traveler's spirit, you can sit down next to them in a pub and you start talking to them, and they'll say, "Oh wow, you're from America. Why'd you come here?" And before you leave, you're best friends with them. So it's just a great country for that. That's one of the big differences between them and their northern neighbors. If we come back to the map here, the Netherlands, dear to my heart, I moved here for a reason. The Dutch are much louder. They will tell you their opinion very quickly. This is the only country I've ever been to where I said to a friend, he said, "Oh, did you get a haircut?" I said, "Yeah, I did. Do you like it?" And he went, "No, not really," because the Dutch will give you their honest opinion. They don't mince words. But the Netherlands, I'll skip through quickly again because I will talk for hours about it. But they're a little bit more familiar. These beautiful canals, the row houses, the windmills, which are extremely important because they drained this swampland to make. They made land, which then no nobility earned, so the people got it. So you got the first country that kind of belonged to normal people and ended up laying the foundation for the end of feudalism. The modern world partially exists because the Netherlands used to be swampy. Now you forget about it until they pull up the cobblestones and you look underneath and it's sand with seashells in it. But they built an amazing country here. They're known for their gardens, Keukenhof being a famous one. Millions of people go, but it's really all year. Don't think it's just during those 2 months. It's the Dutch love their flowers. They love their bicycles. If you've been here, you learned about it. They have their bike lanes. It's significant though. The bicycles are not just an accident. But to go through a couple others, this is just everyone wears clogs. When you get to the country, you have to give up your shoes. You are forced to wear clogs. Okay. My friends' grandparents still wear clogs, but you don't see too many around. But you do have cheese. You know, the grocery store has really only 2 items. It's all cheese or this peculiar plant that they sell a lot of here too. So all of my neighbors are one or the other. You know, they're all milkmaids or potheads. That's not true. But why do I say it? Because stereotypes, that and this one, the prostitution, are something people think they know about the Netherlands, and it drives the Dutch crazy because people think, oh, the Dutch, they're a bunch of pot smoking, sex worker visiting, bike riding tulip farmers. That is not exactly accurate. So why do they have these things? Because they've been taught by where they live to be realistic. You can tell yourself that, oh, that storm that came through and flooded everything, that won't happen again, no problem. But the Dutch don't do that here. They've learned to be honest, to be pragmatic, to be tolerant. That's why they have all of that stuff. They have marijuana because they know people are going to smoke it. So you figure out an avenue for it to not cause as much harm. They like harm reduction, whether it's waves or cannabis. Same thing with prostitution. People are sometimes surprised. They think the Dutch are all avid fans and customers. They're not. They just realize prostitution is going to exist, so we should do something about it. And then the bike lanes is the last piece because people go, oh, they love biking. It's because it's flat. We're still in February. Let me tell you, from a frostbitten perspective, it's not actually an easy place to ride a bike. They all ride bikes because when cars were taking over the country, they realized they didn't like that. And so to be pragmatic, they invested a ton of money in bike lanes. And that's why they all bike, is because they paid the bill to have the infrastructure. That kind of thing just shows why I think the Netherlands are just traditionally, they're just a very mature country, and they're a ton of fun to visit. They just think things through and are honest about it. Case in point, if you have a giant intersection like that, it's hard for the bikes to get around, so you build a gigantic elevated bike lane crossing thing. They have one in Scandinavia too, but this one's better. Don't tell Paul I said that next week. But this is just one of these things the Dutch do. They say things are pretty, let's make them work. Let's figure out a way to have it all work. It's just a great country to travel around in. Now, I mentioned in the setup to this, one other thing I want to cover as fast as I can is not only are these countries all different and a ton of fun to visit, they're really quite important because the history of previous centuries is great. It's fun to do. It's fun to have a great meal, listen to good music, see great art. But we live in 2025. So how can travel help us today and next year? This is Rotterdam. This is where I live. After the war, because there's a whole story I'll tell you when you get here, how this city was bombed by the Germans because they were putting up too much of a fight. Hitler thought they would steamroll right over the Dutch, but they did quite well. So they ordered the entire city flattened. They get ferocious wind here. So when you drop incendiary bombs and the wind comes in off the North Sea, The whole city is gone. Now, that has a couple of consequences. One, you have that Dutch honesty, ingenuity, curiosity, know-how. They're great engineers. They've been building all these dikes and things. So they figured out, what do you want from a city? And they experimented with their city. This is a good, I took this afternoon because I realized you want to see this. That the line of that fire went right up that street. So the building on the left predates it. It wasn't a remarkable building, but you can kind of see it's got those arches. It's more interesting. On the other side of the street, World War II happened. So that building was rebuilt after the war because they had 800,000 people homeless because of about a half hour of bombing and then the 24 hours of fire after that. An insane thing to handle. So they had to build houses quickly. It's not ugly, but it's not quite the same. That got them through the 20th century, modernism, all these things. But then they started looking around and they decided, what else do we need? In the back there, that's the Zalmhaventoren. You have to say it 3 times fast before they open the doors. That is the tallest building in the Netherlands. And the features in there, how it's built, what it does is absolutely beautiful because the Dutch realized if we're going to build a city, we want to do it right. And it was the right place to do it because that building right there is the White House. It's called the Witte House. It was the first skyscraper in Europe. Granted, that's 1898, so it doesn't qualify as a skyscraper anymore. But at the time, that was astonishing. And they've taken that ingenuity, and you can see some in the buildings behind. They're investigating, what do you need a city to do? We're used to skyscrapers kind of like you see on the left. They take the whole lot, come down, fill the whole thing, and the only reason to be there is if you work there. So rush hour in the morning, rush hour in the afternoon, it's busy. Other than that, it's kind of dead. In the evening, there's no one there. It starts being dangerous. If anybody else on the call is from San Francisco, spent time in my old hometown, the financial district, not a great place to be after 6 o'clock because there's no reason to be there. So you start feeling abandoned and it feels kind of aggressive. It's not really a friendly place. The Dutch didn't want that. So they've started experimenting. How do you bring people into spaces? How do you let light through? How do you make it interesting? How do you make it so people don't feel trapped? Especially after 2000, they started all this computer modeling with where does the light go? Where does the wind go? How are we going to build a city that's pleasurable to be in and still feels fun? This one, I just want to give you one quick case in point. This is just on the Wilhelmina Pier in the southern part of the city. This all used to be port facility, which was abandoned after the shipping moved out to the bigger harbor. So in the 80s and 90s, this was all abandoned. It was all squatter properties, and they wanted to tear them down. So they started putting skyscrapers in on the back there. The one on the right is by Renzo Piano, the guy who did the Pompidou in Paris. He's one of the famous big poobah architects. But more important to me are the other two. The one in the back is by a Rotterdam architect, Rem Koolhaas. He did the library in Seattle, a bunch of other significant buildings. In the front, those buildings are the old warehouses. They were going to destroy them to build housing, but they said, we don't have too much old. We want to save what is old. Let's figure out a way to do it. So they preserve them, add things on top, add different buildings there, keep the light going through, but you don't want a big canyon effect. So this is in between those two. I apologize. I don't have a wide enough angle lens to show it real well, but this is between the two. That's the Rotterdam it's called in the front there. And if you look in the bottom right, you can just see that kind of blue. When they realized that the street was going to start being dark, they lifted the entire building, the plan for it, an extra huge atrium, and they continued the street right through the building. So you can see through the building to the river on the other side, the open blue sky on the other side, the rest of the city. And it creates this feeling that you're in a city, but it feels like a town. So you have all this amazing facility, but it doesn't feel heavy. If you compare it to like New York streets, where the buildings use the entire block, they're much longer. They're like 120 meters. The building blocks in most of Europe are more like 30 meters. So they figured out a way to keep it from feeling like these big canyons like that. And then especially as of 2 years ago, they've started a whole new field of architecture called neuroarchitecture, where they study the neurology, the neurobiology of how the human being interacts with a city. They put those things on that watches where you look and your pulse and your stress and all that. So they're really, the Netherlands, specifically Rotterdam, Antwerp's working on it too. They're figuring out how to build a city in the future that does what we need a city to do, has all of the infrastructure, the housing. Rotterdam has all these high rises. They're residential. They're not offices because that's what people need. and they're figuring out how to make it an enjoyable place. You put cafes in there, you put creative houses like this, where they made these cube houses just to spur discussion. It's like a tree house. They lifted the tree house in the air. They're fun to look at, they're quirky to live in, and you have space underneath where you can do stuff. On the tops of the buildings, they have farms and restaurants and things, just to, because what do you need from a city? You need to enjoy it. You don't want it to just be given over to air conditioning and concrete. You put a surf wave in the middle of the town. Why not? For the people who want to go surf, they pay a little bit, they can practice surfing. For everybody else, you sit and watch the people learn to surf. I know I'm from Santa Cruz, so I've been around a lot of surfer dudes. So watching these ones is tons of fun because they're just having so much fun and they're terrible at it. So it's just watching them, watching them splash. It's just a lot of fun. And then you go in the market hall right there and get something to eat. It's just this fun spirit of like, what do you want to do for people? Build a floating platform out there. You have some saunas behind there. You have some offices and a restaurant off to the right, and give people a place to swim. Now you're swimming in the river of the largest harbor outside of China, and it's clean water that you can swim in. They monitor it, they double check and everything, and you can just go swimming there because they've run a city that's fantastic. So that's how this area is asking the question, what should a city be? And you get to come, you get to walk around, you get to look at it, you get to think about things you never thought about. I never paid much attention to architecture before, but I'd heard painting is art that you look at, sculpture is art that you walk around, and architecture is art that you walk through. And as you walk around a city like Rotterdam and some of these ones in the Low Countries, you really get a sense of how true that is, of what goes into making these buildings. It opens my eyes. It changed how I see travel. It's part of why I love Romania, because Bucharest is an architectural wonderland. So coming here definitely changed how I travel with how much it taught me. This is Leiden, the other day trip we take. This is one of the cities where they said, okay, no more cars in the center. So maybe you use a boat, maybe you walk, the bikes. Let's experiment how we can take a city and make it for humans, not just for cars. The other one, Antwerp is doing it too. That's their old harbor house. Just their, it's an administrative building. It wasn't big enough. Did they just build a boring building next to it? No. Let's do something interesting. Not far from there, you have their museum, the museum on the Strom, on the Scheldt, the Maas Museum. That it looks like a giant sort of, I don't know, demonic computer Rubik's Cube. I don't know, but it's beautiful. Ask these questions of like, what do you want? How do you want to build? And just seeing that novelty is so much fun. Okay, really quick, I'm going to zip through back to this picture of destroyed Rotterdam. That one building that's still there is the Laurenskerk. You can see the roof has been destroyed by the bombing, but they put it back, they restored it. That's we do have some old classic Dutch neighborhoods outside of that bomb district, but in that area, there's only 4 main buildings. That's one of them that they kept. Inside that church from 1421, they have all the normal church stuff. You have the big, beautiful atrium there the nave on the left, the giant, incredible pipe organ there. You have the graves of various heroes. I love that guy. He just looks so cranky about getting killed. He's like, I was a pirate. This was a lot of fun. But you get all that classic European stuff. But it's the Netherlands. They know that they got to work together. They got to be pragmatic. They got to be tolerant. They got to have a different philosophy. So in the church, there's a painting of an AA meeting. I think a lot of us in our lives, our families, our friends have encountered, alcoholism, substance abuse, these things. Those meetings are frequently in a church, but they're kind of out of sight a lot of the time. And the Dutch kind of say, well, why? Like, what do you want people to feel ashamed? Shame never doesn't help anyone. The people who should be ashamed don't feel it, and the people who do feel it, it's not helping them. So they take a painting of an AA meeting and put it in the church. What else? These are in that church. They're temporary exhibits, but I absolutely love them. On the top is a series of photos of the 7 virtues. We know about the 7 deadly sins, but you also have 7 virtues. And they put them all in here in a present tense context of what that would mean. Like, clothing the naked, you can donate and send it to Africa and the difficulty on the textile market, or you find a secondhand center there in town. That's the second one in. There's visiting, helping the sick, taking care of the sick. Maybe it's your responsibility to try to make sure you have good health care. All of these questions, they are willing to ask that and spur discussion here. The Belgians would never do that because they don't want to provoke fights. There's too much going on. The Dutch say, hey, we're all in this together. Let's have a complex conversation. In the bottom there, those are all triptychs. It's that famous structure, if you've seen the Van Eyck in Ghent, Belgium, where the doors open. They kept it closed all week, and on Sunday they open it to the thing inside. They used that traditional religious art form and made different ones for religious holidays from all around the world in their church. So you have Christmas and Easter are in there, but you also have all these different religious holidays just to spur this discussion. This one also, just outside of the train station, just had pictures of people from every possible category you could think. It goes for like a mile. Every different category thing of people, something they said that they would like people to know, just so that we can get to know each other. Because if you don't know any category of person, you might be more likely to think about them as that, versus if you get to know each other. So these questions are not just kind of fun. They're very Dutch. They're very kind of Benelux in terms of like, how do you make a citizen that wants to cooperate and work with each other? And that's the key part of the Benelux. The other reason I say it's the heart of Europe, it's not just geographically, it's the heart of Europe because the three countries said, we have a lot of war against each other for a long time. But if we learn to work together by giving up a little bit of it's not maybe independence, by working together, you still maintain your sovereignty and you do better when everyone else is doing better too. That idea of shared strength is what, to me, is Europe. Because Europe isn't a continent, right? Europe is a part of Eurasia, but it's not actually a continent until you give it a distinct identity and political, cultural blending. And all of that comes from these three countries. They were the ones who taught them. After World War II, these three countries started the Benelux, and they said, okay, we're going to lower some of the things at the borders. We're going to allow trade agreements. And then they went to France, Germany, and Italy that had been a little bit brutalized by the war. And they said, you guys come with us. We're going to show you how to do this. And it spread from there. So Europe, as we know it today, where you and I can land in Madrid and we can go, all the way to Copenhagen, and we never have to show a passport, is because this area taught Europe how to get along. And it was pretty nifty. So that is the Benelux, worth going to. There's plenty more to say, but that is the core of it.